We're very, very excited to have you here with us today because today we'll talk about manufacturing. We have the honor of having some of the most senior leaders in government joining us today to launch a study. I'd like to kick us off with Mr. Krishnan, Secretary Meti, who's really sort of been behind shaping this vision for the study that we will launch today. Sir, over to you to do a keynote and kick us off.
Thank you, and that is quick and businesslike. I know all of you have, no, this is fine. All of you have exactly 55 minutes to do the session, including the changeovers. My colleagues, the Secretary of MSME, Shri Das, Mr. Rohit Kansal, Additional Secretary in Textiles, and Mr. Bhuvnesh Kumar, who's the CEO of the National Institute of Smart Governance. One of the things that we are very keen on doing as part of the IndiaAI mission is to ensure that AI truly has meaning in the real sectors of the economy. What is it that AI can do in the real sector in terms of enhancing productivity, enhancing efficiency, enhancing capabilities and skills? This is important because you can have the best models, you can have all the compute you want, you can have all the data you want, but if it doesn't convert into something that is truly meaningful for the people, then you don't see the kind of growth that we expect to see. And which is why one of the areas which we wanted to focus on specifically was manufacturing. And within manufacturing, what typically happens is large enterprises have ways in which they can finance this transition and make sure that they see the value in it, they are able to make the necessary investments and stay the course to make sure that they see outcomes which they require. Whereas smaller enterprises and enterprises in traditional sectors like textiles and other areas may or may not necessarily be in a position to make the kind of investments which are needed to support this. So we wanted to actually launch a detailed study. And this morning I was at another session with JPAL in terms of, how do we do impact? So as part of this, saying rather than just throw good money after bad, do a proper study, figure out how the most impactful way of actually putting AI into manufacturing should really work, particularly for MSMEs, get that study done and move forward. So I'm very happy that NISG is partnering with Athena Infonomics and with the concerned ministries. And the ministries, of course, include MSME, which will cover a broad range, textiles, pharmaceuticals, because they are looking at pharma-related manufacturing, and of course, electronics, which incidentally looks like it could become one of the largest manufacturing sectors within this entire space. So in these sectors, what is it that AI can do to actually impact manufacturing is the theme of what we are attempting to do through this study. And I, for one, personally, am really looking forward to the outcomes of what this brings out and practical real life use cases of where we can deploy. So I would be one of the most eager audiences to this study, and I can assure you, Deepa, you will get chivied to see that it comes out in time. And not that you've not been chivied already, but some more will be on the way to make sure that this happens. Thank you very much. And once again, thank you all for turning out in such large numbers for the IndiaAI Impact Summit. Thank you for putting up with some of the inconveniences, but being such an enthusiastic and engaged audience in all the events and part of everything that has gone on. And I invite you all to also go and visit the expo. Some wonderful use cases there and applications there. Please do spend some time. You'll need at least a couple of hours to at least walk through all the important stalls, if not every stall. Thank you.
So I request you to now formally launch the study. Thank you so much. There's a copy of the study design that's available on your table that we rolled up. We also have extra copies for everybody in the room, so feel free to pick one up. So, like like the Secretary Sir outlined, this is a really important area for us to deliver impact. And driving adoption in this space is really crucial. National Institute of Smart Governance sort of is the nodal agency that's been commissioned. So we have the privilege of having the CEO of NISG, Mr. Bhuvnesh Kumar, here with us, who I will invite to deliver a special address on this. Thanks, sir, please.
Thank you, Deepa. Respected Secretary Shri S.L. Dasji, my friend and batchmate Shri Rohit Kansal, Additional Secretary Textiles, Deepa, my colleagues from NISG, and all the dignitaries who are present for this session of AI for MSMEs. I think I'd like to start with thanking the India AI mission in the way they have designed this program right from the beginning, and the way this AI Impact Summit is being democratized and being open to people from all walks of life. And they have tried to cover as many areas as possible. Of course, with the 7-pillar structure of the India AI mission, and apart from that, going into each vertical at the micro level and trying to understand and bring impact through AI, I think that's a marvelous way. And for the MSMEs, they have engaged, the India AI mission has engaged the National Institute of Smart Government in partnership with Ethna Infonomics to understand how AI is going to impact MSMEs and what is their readiness for adoption of MSMEs. See, we all know that India is already in a decisive phase, and it's an economic journey which is happening, and we are going up the ladder in terms of the largest economies, and we are supposed to be the 3rd largest economy soon to be there. And artificial intelligence is going to make a very, very important impact in the whole journey. But looking at the size of this country, it is not going to be driven only by the large industries only, because finally the workforce and the actual production which happens is the millions of small industries, and those are the micro, small and medium industries where this impact is going to make a potential difference. And that's why it's important to understand how much is their readiness, what are they going to adopt, are there solutions available, and can they afford that cost, or do we need to bring those solutions within the affordability of the MSMEs and make them viable for them and make them the early adopters? And which are the industries which can be the early adopters, where the clusters are located. And I think we are working on 3 different fields in the textiles, pharmaceuticals and electronics, and looking at the cluster approach and going back to them and doing this study. And the inception report which has been launched, I think there are sufficient copies. We can share these copies with you also. So maybe you can have a look at this and give us a feedback and tell us what more we can do in this side. As Secretary also mentioned, I think it's extremely important that we complete this study as early as possible, and maybe then at the same time have a kind of bouquet of services, or maybe a shelf of AI based solutions, and then offer these solutions to the MSME and say that, okay, yes, there is a shelf, and now you can go and pick these kind of solutions which may be applicable to you. These are the ERPs, these are the CRMs, these are those kind of other solutions which may be relevant to you. This may be in production, this may be in the other sectors, and then you can perhaps pick out those generic solutions and customize according to your needs and implement them quickly. And maybe at some point of time, government may also say that perhaps we will bear some of the part of the cost also, and you don't have to bear everything, because we really don't want you to become uncompetitive. We really want the MSMEs to remain competitive and offer the best of the solutions to the market at an affordable price for the consumers, and that's the most important part. And these are the 3 sectors where India is doing very well. Both in electronics manufacturing, the growth rate has been I think 35% year on year, last 2-3 years, and it's growing. Electronics manufacturing, same is with the pharmaceuticals and the textiles. Textile has been the traditional stronghold of India, and if we don't adopt the AI as of now, then perhaps it may be possible that we lag behind. And that's why, to remain competitive and remain market ready, it's essential that we bring solutions. And this is an opportunity not only for the MSMEs, I think it's an opportunity for large number of startups and AI solution providers also. They also need to look at and tell us what are the kind of solutions they can offer and what kind of prices at which they can offer, and how those prices can be competitive for the MSMEs to adopt those solutions. And the early adopters can then motivate the others, and the next set of people, set of industries follow it. So it's a great thought process altogether, and without taking too much of time, because we have a limitation of time. We've been allotted only 55 minutes, and that's why we cleared up the first part in first 10 minutes itself. So I am not going to talk about too many general things. I think we'll go specifically into the study. I'll request Deepa to make a presentation on that, and of course then we are going to hear our dignitaries on the dais and their views on this. And maybe towards the end, if you have a few questions, we'll be happy to answer those. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And one of the reasons we wanted to do this here is because we want to take the industry along with us from the get-go. And we want to take the AI service providers along with us from the get-go, right? Because here on the dais, you have some of the most senior policymakers who are actively thinking about this issue and are here to demonstrate their commitment to wanting to make a difference. Alongside that, we wanted to make sure that this commitment is visible to the industry and we're able to work with the industry very closely, because that's the spirit with which we are launching this effort. I'd like to start with this statement, right, which is the next productivity leap will be won by MSMEs that adopt AI. There is no questions about it. It's already here. We need to get it right. And through various discussions and sessions starting yesterday morning, I've heard Secretary Mr. S. Krishnan, I've heard other senior dignitaries and thought leaders talk about how it's just logic, right? We will adopt technology if it's accessible and it makes sense to us. We see that it adds value. It's a very simple thing. And that's really what the focus of this effort really is, right? But there is something bigger, which is India today truly is emerging as the use case capital of the world, because we're showing to countries everywhere that you can not just advance adoption, but you can do it at scale through frugal innovation. So I think there is a story here that is not just domestic, but it's about what is it that we're telling the world about how you can think about making artificial intelligence available to every organization and make it truly inclusive. So within that framing, where do we see this sort of study that's being commissioned by the India AI mission fit under METI, right? We, alongside NISG, see this as an opportunity to fill a market intelligence gap, right? Because on the demand side, which is really on the side of the industry, we see that these are the most common questions that have come up in our early consultations, right? Like, what's the value, really? How much do I have to spend, and what is the value from spending on it? There are so many technology service providers selling AI LLM agents to me already. How do I evaluate between those? How do I make a choice? How do I make an informed choice? And there are very serious questions about data and digital readiness, right? So there are these information gaps on the demand side. And on the supply side, we see similar challenges, because talking to technology service providers and AI service providers, one of the most consistent things is it is so difficult to acquire MSME customers. It's expensive to acquire the customers, it's expensive to retain the customers. So there is a huge role here, I would say, if we do demand aggregation meaningfully. A lot of technology supply service providers on the supply side can meaningfully access. So it's not that the ecosystem isn't already here. I think a lot of the ingredients to that ecosystem exist. What we need, or what's missing, is a clear segmentation and understanding of that market, bridging that market intelligence gap, and thinking about what are some repeatable pathways that can scale across MSMEs. And really, that's what this study is intended to do. So how are we going to do it? Like Mr. Bhuvnesh Kumar just described, we have textiles, electronics, pharma, and medtech as the three focus sectors that we will kickstart with, because we want to start somewhere and then take it to more sectors within MSME. And we'll first start by learning. right? We're going to do over 350 factory immersions across these sectors. So we're actually going to visit the factories, spend time in these factories, spend time with the leaders, but also the staff and other members of that factory context, and also talk to a lot of technology service providers, right, on the supply side, and really learn. So that's what we call the discovery phase. We want to be smart about this. We want it to be iterative and rapid. And we want to, as we're learning on the demand side, we also want to quickly validate and hear from the supply side. And then we want to start designing. And I'll talk about the design element in the next slide in a minute. But we really want to start thinking, how do I go from, and this is a question that one of the, as we were designing this, the secretary asked me, he said, what can you do that a chat GPT won't already tell me, right? And I said, sir, there is a lot, right, that we cannot get out of a chat GPT today in terms of details of how something will really work. And I think that's where the design element comes. And then finally, it's how do we then make sure that what we're learning doesn't stay in a small room or with a small group of people, but is made really available and diffused in meaningful ways and in practical ways to industries, to service providers, to policymakers along the way. This is sort of the blueprint that we're going to use, right? The first thing we want to do is to get our archetypes right. What are the high priority, high ROI use cases? How can you build archetypes where you define the people, process, data, operational requirements, right? Because you cannot talk about AI without talking about the instrumentation and the compute and the elements that you need to get right to unlock the power of AI. We're then going to really, and this is another anecdote as we were preparing this that I'm very fond of and I go back to, because one of the joint secretaries in my conversation with him, he said every SME is unique. You cannot use a single brush and just assume you can kind of have a single templatizable approach that will work across a lot of SMEs. And I think there is something really powerful about that I think we want to incorporate. So how do we think about scaling pathways? How do we think about both entry thresholds? Maybe in some cases, the advisory is don't do AI yet. Don't embrace it. Maybe you're not ready. Maybe the risks are too high, right? So we want to be able to provide that sort of due diligence and guidance. And then allow for industries to know, how do you know something's working, right? The closest example in the knowledge services for us is, where has Copilot licenses worked? Has it unlocked value for your company? How do you know something is working and it's unlocking value? So how can we make available to the industry that guidance along with the industry? Because it's a lot of this already, right? We're in some instances just going to be capturing that knowledge and making it available. And this piece is the most crucial, and it's a piece of guidance that we've received from the get-go from Mr. S. Krishnan, Secretary MeitY, which is, I want you to tell me where policy is lacking. Where is it that we already have good policies to be responsive to these challenges and needs? And where do we need new policies and new guidance that then the leaders here and the policymakers who you see here on the dais can actively think about and engage with? And how do we think about questions of procurement and financing in a very practical way? So the vision for this, which I know is ambitious, but we're really going to do our very best to get to all of these elements over the course of this study that's being launched today. Very quickly, as a snapshot, what can you expect, right? So if you're an industry, you're here in the room, you're an MSME, and you're thinking about how you could go on this journey of artificial intelligence, we want to first start by sharing what are validated use cases that we think will work on the ground. What are some clear, practical, low-risk adoption pathways that will work? How can you procure these services? Do you want to just do equipment as a service with an integrated AI model because that's just life in terms of life cycle costing cheaper? Or do you have to unbundle and think about these services differently? How do you actually procure the support that you need? And what is the visibility you have in terms of the impact that it creates in terms of market and productivity? And finally, making sure we make a service almost sort of like an intermediary that facilitates that matchmaking between supply and demand. So providing access to AI service providers that can come in and talk about what their models and tools are right from the beginning. To policymakers, I think one of the things that's come through very clearly is just an appetite and a curiosity to learn. right? I think it's come through very clearly in all of my meetings where they've said, we also want to learn. We want to hear from the ground what is and isn't working, what's already being done, where the opportunities are, and the evidence to back this up with very targeted guidance on finance, procurement, and regulatory aspects and safety aspects that can guide policy thinking, including the ingredients that will be necessary to build the ecosystem. And finally, this piece is very important, and the secretary touched on it even in his keynote, which is, how do you know it's working? How do we track impact? So we don't keep throwing good money behind things that aren't necessarily working. Finally, if you are a technology service provider, right? If you are a service provider today that's providing technology services to manufacturing entities, we're really excited to engage with you, learn from you, but also to share back with you what are some of these deployment-ready use cases? What are some clear operational and technical requirements that you will need to start thinking about as you're engaging with industry from a technology service provision standpoint? What are some of the priority clusters that you can engage with where the appetite is already very high, it's not latent demand, sort of more active demand? And how can you engage with MSMEs, but policymakers, but also align with national priorities and scaling opportunities? So this is really the ambition of this exercise. We're so excited to have you all in the room with us. And with this, I have the honor of inviting Shri S.L. Das, Secretary, Ministry of MSME. Sir, we're so honored to also have you here with us to invite a special address.
Thank you, Deepaji, and good afternoon, a very good afternoon to all colleagues and friends here, and thanks a lot for making me part of this very exciting event. You know, Deepa used a very apt epithet, India as the use case capital of the world in AI economy. Now it's really apt, you know, as just I was entering the Bharat Mandapam, you know, I was really struck, you know, energized by the lot of energy, lot of the talent pool in this compact premises. And really, I felt that this is a very apt epithet, and not only metaphor, but an actual thing. So India is a use case capital, and you see so much of talent pool and rich talent pool we have. It's really inspiring. So great to be here. So now, why am I here? This is basically to really reinforce the conviction that we all share in the government, that it is the industry which is going to drive this AI transformation, AI-led transformation or AI power transformation of Indian economy. It's one of the great force multipliers. AI is a great force multipliers, and that's how India proposes to use it for its various national macro goals towards Atmanirbhar Bharat or Viksit Bharat in the longer term. So it is essentially to restate or kind of underscore this point that me and some of my colleagues from the government are here. It is to be essentially an industry-led venture. At the same time, there are, in the Indian context, we are currently at an inflection point, aiming for a high trajectory economy and also reaping the dividends of a kind of a demographic dividend of this rich and the biggest talent pool in the world. It does require several support systems which require public support and public investment. So essentially it's a partnership. It's a partnership which is where primarily the solutions would come from the industry. At the same time, government would have to do its bit in terms of tweaking the policy design, in terms of providing resources where private sector resources would not automatically come, and providing public goods, creating public goods and other public securities like data security, ownership of data, transparency, those values which go into a high-level economy and high-level ecosystem. So the reason why it's both promising and challenging is we are trying to take, and I must first of all compliment Deepa and of course the IndiaAI mission, congratulate them for this very wonderful initiative. It's a very, very real, in the sense we are going to take AI to the shop floor. It's a confluence of AI at the shop floor. And the challenging part, while it's a great promise, and the promising part is that today, as we speak, we have digitally registered 76 million micro, small, and medium enterprises in the country. We can see the digital footprint, 76 million. And it's ever growing. By March, we hope to cross 80 million. So this is the large constituency, and about more than a fifth of them are already in manufacturing. In fact, many of the MSMEs who actually classify themselves as services actually do have an element of manufacturing somewhere or the other, upstream or downstream. So it's a huge constituency. It's a huge opportunity for our industry to really uptake. And India, as you are all aware, is very, very geared towards really on the manufacturing, the National Manufacturing Mission, all the other line ministries such as textile, pharma, medtech, all of them are DPIT. They are all geared to really push manufacturing in a big way. However, the gains of such initiatives can happen only if they are also parallelly AI enabled in terms of higher productivity, in terms of various linkages, in terms of improving competitiveness and quality. So why do we bring in MSME here? We bring in MSME for a very, very fundamental reason. And all of you are aware of that. It's a kind of axiomatic, but let me restate it. The MSMEs today contribute hugely to the economy, to export, to employment. Very, very important for India, employment. I would underscore that twice. Empowerment of women, of the weaker sections, and environmental sustainability. All the 5 E's, which are fundamental to our national growth and aspirations, are very much really arise in a very fundamental way from the MSMEs. So without a very strong, dynamic, and contemporary and forward-looking progressive MSME sector, we would be seriously handicapped in really reaching our national aspirations and goal. So that being so, at the same time, as I said earlier, the transformation has to be industry-led. There is no other way. It has to be supported by academia on the one hand and by the government on the other. So where we come in is to these 2-3 things. Number one, that I would like, on behalf of my colleagues here and elsewhere in the government, I would like to really reiterate that government stands fully committed to really making this MSME ecosystem vibrant, competitive, quality-oriented, and very, very a productive sector, which can really be the force multiplier for the bigger industries and the other sectors of the economy to really flourish and grow. Number one. Number two, government is extremely committed to really bringing all those other policy instruments, should they be required today or tomorrow, in terms of enhancing ease of doing business, in terms of improving the processes, in terms of having minimum government and maximum of governance, in terms of letting the industry innovate and move forward. Number three, government is equally committed to pool in its resources, and the set of people here do represent that kind of a convergence across sectors to really support programs where they require. Because MSMEs, there are a few challenges in terms of reaching out to them, making them aware, giving them the confidence that they would have the user ownership over whatever changes we seek to bring. And first and foremost, that eventually it is their employee which will gain in terms of productivity, their employability will go up, and their business viability will get enhanced. It is very, very important to drive home this kind of a confidence in the MSME ecosystem. Luckily, in our country, we have the sectorally well-aggregated MSMEs. Demand aggregation, which Deepa spoke of, is very, very important. However, we have a very good positive feature that we have all sectors are mapped in terms of the sectoral profiles, in terms of the geographical concentrations. So there is, in a way, a logical aggregation already existing on the ground. So a study like this, I think, would open the gateways of many more such evidence-backed interventions where we can actually benefit the MSMEs. And I think it's a great opportunity, and I would really call upon our very, very talented young friends, our talented pool, to come forward, look at these micro situations, and see how it aggregates into solutions which the industry can provide, and where government can play the role of enablers in terms of reaching out to the MSMEs, giving the confidence that this is eventually to improve their business viability, eventually to improve the productivity of their employees, and to strengthen the sustainability of their operations. We are there to give that kind of a support and confidence, and I would urge my these industry leaders, our young talent pool particularly, to really come forward and focus on the MSMEs, because these will be the drivers, and these will be drivers of growth and innovation for future, and these will be the really the ecosystem which will actually absorb the maximum for employment, quality employment for India of the future. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, sir. I've had the privilege of experiencing the passion and the clarity with which the secretary just described the vision that the government's bringing to this firsthand over the last couple of months or so. We're really thrilled to be working with you. Next up, I have the honor of inviting Mr. Rohit Kansal, who is Additional Secretary, Ministry of Textiles. And the first thing that occurred to me, and I just shared it with sir as we were standing outside and chatting, this is perhaps the only discussion on textiles on AI that I've seen in the entire summit. Because I was counting for who else is talking about textiles and artificial intelligence. And as far as my knowledge goes, and I'd like to be corrected if I'm wrong, I think this is probably the only one that highlights or spotlights textiles. So with that, we'd love the honor of you coming in and sharing your perspectives with us.
Thank you, Deepa. Secretary MSME Shri Das, my friend and batchmate Shri Bhuvnesh Kumar, Mr. Aman Sharma, Joint Secretary Pharmaceuticals, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with a provocative statement. India's AI dividend will eventually be earned on the factory floor. As I walked to this conference, I was struck by two things. One, I saw billboards which refer to AI as AI equals all inclusive. And then, as my senior colleague and Secretary MSME pointed out, looking at the energy in the mandapam and the vibrance one could feel about, I was reminded of what Alfred Marshall, the famous economist, said. It's in the air. AI is in the air. But as we navigate this AI which is in the air, and as we talk about breakthrough developments on one hand, and a more inclusive and democratic AI on the other, the question that we need to ask ourselves, what is it in AI that will move the needle, particularly for a country, as you rightly remarked, the use case capital, which is India? And the clear answer is that India's long-term economic shift cannot solely be determined by digital native businesses. It will eventually be decided by whether AI can modernize legacy industries like textiles, food processing, leather, auto components, sectors where there is a legacy, where there is depth of capacity, but also where production processes are uneven, partly digitized, or manually monitored. India's manufacturing base is dominated by MSMEs, who employ millions, support small industrial networks, and drive exports. And yet, many of them operate with uneven monitoring, with informal workflows, thin margins, often competing on lower labor expenses and homegrown adaptations to cut costs, sometimes what we locally call jugaad. Productivity improvement in these sectors will matter far more for national income than incremental gains in already digitized sectors. And mind you, I am not talking about replacing labor at scale. I think the opportunity here is different. Embedding intelligence into existing systems to reduce defects, limit waste, lower energy consumptions, strengthen audit preparedness. And let me talk about a sector that I am most familiar with, textiles. Contributing to 2.5% of the national GDP, 10% of merchandise exports, the second largest employer in the entire ecosystem, a domestic ecosystem worth around $140 billion, an exports ecosystem worth $40 billion, employing 4.5 crore people, 45 million people directly. How can we move the needle in a sector that is so critical as exports? And how can we blend productivity, sustainability, and bring them together in a manner that improves not just productivity, but global competitiveness? AI-enabled quality inspection can detect weaving or dyeing defects in real time. Predictive maintenance tools can reduce machine downtimes. And I could go on and on. But I really don't want to presuppose your study. I think this is what your study is supposed to tell us at the end of this study.
You're making our jobs easier.
Yeah. Or more difficult. But what I do want to say, that each gain at the unit level may appear small and incremental, but across thousands of MSMEs, the cumulative impact on quality, operating margins, and export reliability will be significant. And that, I think, is the economic logic of use of AI at the factory floor, in manufacturing, in MSMEs. Global competitiveness no longer depends on labor or wage arbitrage. Global buyers increasingly value consistent quality, delivery reliability, transparent supply chains. They demand granular visibility across production networks. And AI-driven measurement networks can allow Indian firms to meet all these standards at lower compliance and verification costs. Another important dimension is sustainability. Data-based traceability has now become a market entry requirement. And here again, real-time measurement systems using AI, which track emissions, water, energy intensity continuously rather than retrospectively, will help us break into these markets. But why is this study important for us? This study is important for us for one important reason. And what is that important reason? Readiness will determine what scales. Across the MSME ecosystems, we have firms which are very good at what they are doing, which are competitive at what they are doing, but they are unevenly monitored, they are partially digitized, and it is important for us to lay a level playing field for them to using AI. But before they can start doing that, they have to digitize. They have to adopt some of the basic traceability, data interoperability mechanisms, and this is what we are looking at from this study. What is the second thing that MSMEs need? For them, any returns from AI have to be visible, have to be time-bound, they have to accrue to them in a short period of time. Next, cluster-level deployment is important. Shared digital infrastructure, common data standards, collective service platforms can help us adopt lower adoption costs and create scale efficiencies. Fourth, vendor lock-in has to be discouraged as much as possible. And finally, and what is most important, AI has to be seen as productivity enhancing, not labor displacing. We cannot look at it as an either or issue. We are not looking at AI to displace labor. It is not a productivity versus a headcount issue. It is improving productivity, making labor more productive while adding to global competitiveness through real-time monitoring, lower machine downtime, etc., etc. Therefore, the focus needs to shift from headcount management to productivity, value upgrade, global competitiveness. AI adoption in MSMEs will improve only when quality is improved without impacting jobs. All these things have implications for policy, but we will discuss them when we get this report. All I want to say at this point of time that I really look forward to NISG and Athena coming up with implications of adoption for policymakers. What regulations need to change? What kind of fiscal support may be necessary to increase adoption? What kind of monitoring tools may be necessary to enable and evaluate AI adoption impact at scale? But irrespective of what the results of this study are, we are quite clear that the next wave of AI growth will not just come from code. It will not just come from companies, digital native companies scaling rapidly. It will come from machines, shop floors, and supply chains becoming adaptive, and intelligent. And finally, I began with a provocative statement. I must end with one. India's battle for AI will be won or lost on the factory shop floor. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow, thank you so much. I just want to call out one specific, so much there, right? Like, but the sustainability dimension to competitiveness, I think, is such a powerful one, and is so much more pronounced in textiles, and in something that we're very excited to learn more about as we hit the factory floors and think about where that fits in. So thank you, sir, for that really inspiring and brilliant summary. Now I have the honor of inviting Mr. Raman Sharma, Joint Secretary, Department of Pharmaceuticals, to share his perspectives.
Thank you, ma'am. Esteemed panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I would be very specific to the pharmaceutical sector to which I belong. Just to give you a perspective, in India, we have roughly around 10,000 units who are into pharmaceutical product manufacturing, and out of these, almost 80 to 85% are MSMEs, and the rest are large-scale units. Now, when it comes to the output of pharmaceuticals in the country, now 80% is actually delivered by the 20%. And the 80% MSMEs, they deliver only 20% of the output. Now, this is where I think the problem lies. And there are precisely two problems that we face in the pharmaceutical sector. Number one is without the scale, the cost of manufacturing of the MSME units is way too high. Number two, the quality issues are there. Now, to basically address the quality issues, the Government of India, the drug regulator, had taken an initiative, and they made it mandatory that all the units who are into pharma manufacturing, they need to be compliant to the WHO GMP, or we called it revised Schedule M. So there is a requirement in that you have to basically invest in a lot of infrastructure, hard infrastructure, I would say. So that is a issue, because the scale at which these MSME units operate, they are finding it difficult to actually convert their units to WHO GMP compliant units. Of course, government has several schemes to basically finance a part of this expenditure, but yes, the progress has been not so good. Of course, many units are in the process of converting their or rather upgrading their units to WHO GMP compliance. So these are the two problems, and I think these problems are universal as far as the MSME sector is concerned. High cost of manufacturing because you are not operating at a scale. And number two, if you really want to compete in the market with such high cost, there is a compromise on the quality that happens. Many times it happens. And this is where I think the challenge before the MSME sector lies. And I think it's a perfect tool to basically help the MSME sector to not only reduce their cost of operation but also pay a lot of focus on quality. Now, quality is something which it's not that deliberately the MSME units are trying to produce low quality stuff. Many a times they do not have the required tools or the feedback loop to basically see where the problem lies. Now, as we have seen in recent cases where there was some issue in the cough syrup. Now, in the cough syrup, primarily what happened is that there was no check on the raw material that was coming in. The compounds which ought not to be there, or they had to be there in very minuscule percentage in that particular solvent, they were way too high, and it led to a lot of problems. Now, without a feedback loop, without proper batch testing, and without compilation of proper data as to exactly where that particular solvent emerged. Now, for the regulator also, this is the issue. Now, there is a possibility that that entire solvent came from a particular plant, or maybe it was a common importer which actually imported it. So, for that, if there is no credible data maintained in a particular plant, now it's impossible to basically figure out. So, everything then becomes a post-mortem. So, government, I think when we are talking about compliance to WHO GMP or revised Schedule M, I think along with the hardware, the software component also should be a part of that. Because this is a way you actually encourage the units to shift over to the good manufacturing practices if they realize that it is actually going to help them reduce the cost of operations. Now, this is something which I think the regulators also need to understand, that the good manufacturing practices also should have the use of AI, which should be, I would say, a mandatory part. Ultimately, it helps you to improve your quality, reduce your cost of operations. So this is an area I think which the regulator also needs to look into. And Government of India, various ministries have been funding a lot of common infrastructure development across the country. Various textile parks are there, pharma parks are there. Recently, we have had the medical devices parks also coming in. So the focus so far has been on the hardware part. I think as part of the common facilities that we are funding, the government is funding, should also have AI tools. I think that will help the units actually use AI to bring down their cost of production and enhance their quality. So this is an area I think I'm sure the government is definitely looking into it, and this is something which the industry should also come out and demand such common facilities, that this is what we want. Because ultimately for the MSME sector to succeed and prosper and grow, I think this is where we need to put our money in. And world over, MSME is very important because everywhere you don't need the scale of production. In some products, you need very good quality, but the scale is low. I have worked in the steel sector for some time. Now all the specialty steel grades, they are produced world over by the small units. It's not produced by a big steel mill because they don't, such scale is not required, the demand is not much, but the product is very specialized. So this is where I think the MSME needs to focus on high quality specialized products, where you need not have such a huge scale. Because wherever the scale is there, you cannot match the large scale industry. It's impossible. So this is an area, this is a niche area where the MSME really need to focus on specialized products. And there the government should actually support it, and AI is the way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I think this message that we're no longer talking about just cost competitiveness, we're talking about capability competitiveness, which I think Mr. Kansal talked about and I think was reiterated by you, sir. We can do really high quality specialized products and expand export competitiveness. Is a phenomenal message. For those of you here in the room with us, there is a QR code here. You can scan. This has the whole study design, so you can download it. We also have physical copies that my colleague Atreyi, who's standing here, maybe Atreyi, you could raise your hand, can also share. We have copies. We're happy to first come, first serve. We're happy to hand out to If you could be very precise with your question, sir, please. Yeah.
uh, uh, operationally automation for their businesses. So are you segregating your effort on information technology vertical as well as operational technology vertical as well?
I think exactly how we are going to segment will become clearer when we start doing the work. So I don't want to make any commitments yet because we're just getting started. But I think that's a really valuable perspective. What's becoming very clear is that what we were going to need is an instrumentation layer. That we cannot talk about the model layer without the instrumentation layer. So that's already very clear. Now, what that looks like, are we simply talking about LED loggers, sensors, high resolution cameras? What that means is something we will discover along the way.
Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. The question is, how is AI going to be leveraged primarily for the micro or about to be micro industries, and how can it be benefited? Particularly coming from the skilling and the labor side, I always have this fear that AI is going to replace the labor forces. So how this can be tackled? Thank you so much.
It's a great question. I don't know if any of, yeah. Right. So I'm happy to touch on it a little bit, and if anybody else wants to weigh in, please do. I think with micro, we're going to have to be innovative, right? Margins are thin, right? Ability to make significant investments on the instrumentation layer may not be high. So we'll have to think about what truly what frugal means in terms of unlocking the AI value. We are going to be very intentional about the labor impact right from get-go, right? So far in the early discovery work that we've done, we really don't see artificial intelligence having a huge impact on labor yet. We actually see it, and it goes back to something that has now been talked about in the AI world. The total addressable market's expanding. The pie is becoming larger. So you're not necessarily taking away jobs necessarily, but maybe adding new kinds of jobs and expanding productivity through expanding competitiveness. So there is some of that in terms of the jobs piece, but just on micro, we're going to have to be very creative, and maybe some of it will not just be at the industry level, but could be at the cluster level too, that we can explore. But if any of the panelists, yeah.
No, I think we'll take one more last question. But at the same, I'll request if you have more questions, you have the emails, please write to us. And if you have any feedback also, not necessarily only the questions, if you want to tell us something, guide us something on the study, and you want to give us some suggestions, anything, please write to us. So we'll take the last question. We need to be fair to the next session also. We'll close after this question. Thank you.
So, sir, my question is that since MSMEs, they begin to adopt AI for decisions like credit assessment and inventory planning and even fraud detection, so how can firms ensure the explainability and auditability of these AI-driven decisions?
Gosh, that's a great question, right? There's a whole, I mean, we're now talking about AI governance, right? And model risk, right? There's now a whole body of thinking and work on hardware governance, right? And how to sort of hardwire some of the what a model can and cannot do and how it does things in the hardware. But there's also aspects of how do we look at the data pipelines. We're trying to come up with a framework internally, and I talked about this in the presentation, which is how do you benchmark different service models, right? If you have 4 LLM agents that all offer improvements in operational equipment effectiveness, how do I say what is the safety, risk, relevance? We're trying to think through what the benchmarking framework for that would look like so that it goes back to what I led with on the choice question. Hopefully we'll have more ideas on that as we proceed, but that's the direction. That's a great question. With that,
I have one last question for the textile sector, please, if I may be allowed.
Okay.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Kansal. Right. I mean, I appreciate the kind of presentation that you have made. I've been working in textiles for the last 15 years and with a lot of machinery companies. How do you look at machinery as a service, right? And specifically for the MSME sectors, right? I mean, textiles being an age-old, capital-intensive businesses. Software as a service, we have seen how India excelled, right? Can the same story be replicated for machinery as a service? And what are the policy initiatives, right, that the government is taking from PM Mitra or the PLI scheme for machinery as a service sector? Thank you.
So that's a very good point. If you've been following the textile sector, you would have noticed that in this year's budget, 6 schemes under an integrated textiles program have been announced by the finance minister. One of them is called TEAM, T-E-E-M, Textile Employment and Expansion Program. So under this Textiles Employment and Expansion Program, we have a component on machinery, technology upgradation, as well as machinery manufacturing. So use of machinery through upgradation as well as machinery manufacturing. So some of these aspects we are trying to address through this program. And incidentally, there is a national consultation scheduled at Vanijya Bhavan on the same issue on the 19th. If you would like to come, please let me know. I will send you an invite.
Will it really benefit the MSME, right? I mean,
It
for the machinery manufacturer,
Thank you,
it's
thank you.
perfectly okay.
Thank
It
you. I
certainly
think
will.
yeah.
We can carry on this discussion offline.
Yes.
Happy to.
I really need to thank Secretary Mehti for coming out of his extremely busy schedule and launching this report, Inception report, and Secretary MSME Shri S.L. Das ji for reaching this venue and that too in advance and standing outside just to be part of this session. Thank you so much, sir. My colleague Rohit and Aman for joining this session and enriching this session, and Ethna and my NISG team for all making all the effort to organize this session, and all of you for joining here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.